All right, thanks for joining in. And that is the kind of music we would love to have on an industrial control system incident response hunt and threat hunt. All right, thanks again, everybody, for joining. My name is Dean Parsons, security engineer, I guess, if you will, assessment folk, and also certified SANS instructor for ICS 515 and also ICS 418. Today's conversation is going to be about ITOT convergence. Have we converged? What did we converge? And what does it mean to be converged? What's the impacts? What are the benefits? So let's jump right into this. Anything that we do talk about in these ICS Defense Force conversations are applicable to anything from cookie factories to critical infrastructure. So if you're in energy generation, transmission, distribution, or if you're in critical manufacturing, wastewater management, this content is available and applicable to you. So today is all about, have we converged? What does that mean? What does it mean to be converged? And is the context around converging of technology? Is it around the convergence of people and teams or skills? Or are we talking about the convergence of networks, technical networks, of IT networks meshing with OT networks? So we're going to jump in to see what that really means and have some nuanced discussions and a new look at what convergence actually is and what the benefits are. So we take a look here. For a very long time now, we have actually converged. Technology specifically, we've converged over 20 years ago. That means we have been using traditional IT systems, if you will, Windows devices, Linux devices for a very long time in the industrial control system space. It also means that we've been using those technologies and also gaining some risks as a result. So when it comes to technology, we've absolutely converged. And I think the conversation is shifting more now from the technology to possibly the teams. But if we hang out on technology for just a moment, I want to just kind of go through where we have been using IT systems in the industrial control system space, such as on the human machine interface, even data historians, and so on and so forth. And yes, you are correct. If you see a Windows 7 or Windows XP box on your screen, we do have legacy devices inside the ICS still as well. The question will come up later, though, are these Windows devices, traditional IT systems, treated as IT systems in industrial controls or as OT systems? And what does that mean? So let's take a little bit further look at the technology and what we've gained by converging the technology over the last 20 years in ICS. So specifically, we have gained efficiencies. We've also done improvements in system maintenance, tracking for industrial control environments, better safety management in general for control systems, but also increased our ability to view the control process using these technologies that drive the OT processes. So let me be very clear here. In parts of the industrial control system, we're using Windows devices. They are OT devices, and they do drive the changes in the physical world. In addition to us using traditional technologies the last 20 years or so in ICS, we've gained all those efficiencies we just talked about. But of course, we do now have additional risk, which means we have anything that would target or impact an IT system now is potentially a risk for us to consider in the ICS. But they do have different risk surfaces, which we'll get to. If we take a closer look at this, we're going to talk about the technology as it relates to different layers in the environment. Now, you might look at this and say, well, this looks familiar. It looks like the Purdue model. That's exactly what we're representing in this slide. The Purdue model, at the top level of the Purdue model, is the traditional technologies, those Windows and Linux systems we talked about, which are typically running engineering software for the industrial control systems. You'll see common protocols in that environment as well, but we've converged, which means we have these technologies in here. We have also melded them together with our industrial control system technologies as well. So we still have engineering assets, devices, we have engineering workstations, SCADA alarm servers, human machine interfaces that are not just on Windows devices, but embedded human machine interfaces as well. Below that, as we go down further in the Purdue model, again, more engineering specific devices, programmable logic controllers, RTUs, safety instrumented systems, which are passive and active, and so on and so forth. Hey, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining in. Super cool. All right. Hi, everybody. And at the bottom of this Purdue model, again, we have engineering devices, which are sensors and actuators. So if we're looking at the entire industrial control system, just the top section, we may see traditional operating systems, but that does not mean that this is not a OT device or should not be treated as an OT device. Let's get into a little bit more detail as we pivot through. If we take a look at the same kind of area, the traditional technology and the engineering technology area, we see that at the upper part of it, we do have the things you might see in IT, Windows, Linux, SSH, for example, SMB, HTTP, HTTPS for managing devices on web services, and so on and so forth. But again, as you go down through the Purdue model, you're seeing specific industrial control system protocols, devices, and hardware that you won't see in a traditional IT system. So for example, the embedded operating systems could be running things like embedded HMIs, Ethernet IP and SIP, HART protocol, Modbus TCP, for example, DMP3, 104, and various other industrial control system protocols. But I do want to stress here in this green box, everything that we're seeing here and talking about is inside the industrial environment. So it's really the question now of how do we actually treat these devices? Are they OT or are they IT devices inside the control environment? If we look at it, spoiler alert, right? If we look at it, IT assets, we've done very well with regards to IT systems and patching them on a regular basis every 30 days. That stuff's like clockwork, which is fantastic. Also, aggressive vulnerability scans in IT, also great, works very well. But if we take patch management, if we take vulnerability scanning, even penetration testing, or things like antivirus, signature-based antivirus from IT, and do the same controls for the upper level of that Purdue model there in traditional systems in OT, will we have interesting ramifications? Would it be the same functionality? Would it then prioritize safety and reliability of operations? So the gist of this is no. If we do use those controls and take the same approach and treat OT assets like an IT asset, which has different missions and different environments, we can have not so good ramifications. So traditionally inside the industrial control environment, these Windows devices are OT systems, which means you will not patch them as often, but you can still obviously patch them. One of the cool things about it, if you have a human machine interface, you can actually patch it more regularly inside ICS by their standards. But you can do things like still operate your cookie factory or other parts of your critical infrastructure by using the engineering built-in human machine interfaces as an example on a plant floor. So there are ways to do this. There's just different ways to kind of go about this. So really the conversation has shifted from technology convergence, which we've done 20 years ago, and we're now talking about the convergence of people. And this is really talking about who does security inside industrial control system environments. Who has the knowledge primarily of the control system? Who has the knowledge of the engineering aspects to kind of do proper or effective security inside industrial control systems? So the conversation is really around the teams, the convergence of teams, the skill sets required to do ICS or OT defense, and does that approach prioritize the safety and reliability of operations inside the ICS? I'm just looking at some of the comments that are coming in here. It's great to see a lot of folks joining again, which is awesome. Yeah, very, very cool comments. I'm also looking at any questions that come in as well. So please join in on the questions here. All right, so we're going to pivot to really the conversation of a converged SOC. This really nails home the idea of a converged team and what we talked about, those resources coming together in the environment. Now, if we talk about a converged SOC, the question that ultimately comes up is how do you manage security events that come in IT, and how do you manage the security events that come in through the ICS? And who triages them to understand if it's an attack for IT or ICS? So we do have a suggested approach that, of course, can be helpful, a recommended approach. But generally, whatever organization and ICS you're in, of course, you'll tailor this to suit your needs, prioritizing safety and reliability. So let's take a look at this converged SOC idea. Now on screen, you do see kind of a channeling of security events that are coming in from IT systems and OT systems or ICS systems into one central area. And this central area is one enterprise or organizational SIEM, as you're going to call it. Now from here, the main thing about this screen is you have a converged combined tier, and this tier is your triaging aspect. And of course, as you'd expect, the folks sitting in that triaging kind of environment is going to be IT and ICS folks triaging events, security events from both sides. You're going to have the knowledge in there and the folks in there with the technology and an understanding of the context of engineering to make those decisions. Event comes in, oh, this is some kind of attack we've seen before. It's similar to what we've seen in IT. It doesn't appear to have any ICS related attack or anything bound towards the industrial control systems. So then it would follow the normal triage of escalating IT detections to the IT security team. This way, you're getting dedicated IT folks looking at IT security events. At the same time, though, in that combined or converged SOC, if you will, or converged triaging area, if there is remnants of an attack or a possible attack or an intrusion underway, even in the IT environment that looks like it could be heading towards the industrial control system environment, that's, of course, where you're going to continue to work together, but you'll kick that off to your specific ICS security SOC. In that particular case, those folks have the engineering background, the knowledge of the process, what makes the organization money, how to keep the organization safe in the industrial real world. And of course, you get dedicated incident response in that specific area. So this could be a way to do a converged SOC where you do have that a triaged converged environment, and you still have even separate SOCs that would lead their own triage for their own respective areas. This is how we can have dedicated resources and knowledge in both the IT and the OT area. Again, going back to that converged triaging aspect. Looking at some of the questions that are coming in as we're nearing the end of this episode. Thanks, Darren, for your comments. Appreciate it. What do you think about including the cloud, private, public, with respect to convergence as it relates to the Purdue model? Yeah, great question. Traditionally, as you see the Purdue model, at the very upper part of the Purdue model, which is your enterprise, outside of that, you see the internet, for example, and then the cloud services. If the industrial control system do have any cloud services, you want to make sure you do the usual thing with cloud services, which is kind of make sure it has two-factor authentication and so on and so forth. Generally, with this, with a converged SOC, if you will, those events coming in from a cloud service, for example, again, you want to have IT or ICS on it. So to summarize that excellent question, anybody that has a cloud service for ICS, again, still should filter down through the ICS specific team, and the same goes for the IT side. Now, what's interesting here, if you ever set up cloud services, prioritizing monitoring and not control for the industrial control system, the IT specific security team should absolutely have input in setting up, engaging with a cloud service. So hopefully that answers your question. And we are seeing more cloud services becoming available for ICS related services, but not specifically for controlling the process. So not for, let's put more chocolate chips in the cookie jar to spin it up, and not controlling the cloud to, let's turn off and on the power from the cloud, for example. So very different things of monitoring a control system and controlling a control system through a cloud. Great question. Another question coming in here as well. So how to merge the alerts from ITOT in a safe way? So that's a really good question. There's complex answers as a result, but one way to do that, as we see on screen, is have that central SIEM. So technically, you'll have a device that understands IT networks. That device will send its IT alerts directly into the SIEM, and also you'll have the OT devices or sensors which directly understand the technicalities and protocols of the industrial control area, sending that into the SIEM as well. So again, going back to that triaged area. So merging them in a safe way is really talking about the location of the data. So in some environments, it's really difficult to take your security events from the ICS and push it out through the firewall, up through the Purdue, and put it in an insecure zone. It's not really a recommendation that we have. So the location of your enterprise SIEM will have to not be on the suggested not be on the traditional IT network, not on the control network. So probably an ICS DMZ would be a good place to start having those conversations with your architecture folks from the ICS. And of course, your data privacy folks as well. Don't forget things like compliance. If you're NERC and NERC compliant, where that data goes has ramifications on how it should be treated and secured as well. Great question. All right, looking at the time frame here, going to clue up on the last question here. So thanks, Wes, for your comments and for joining in today. Suggestions on using log forwarders exactly to send directly to the enterprise SIEM, or use two SIEMs and have an ICS SIEM forward event. So great question. So again, I go back to using the two different technologies to understand where you're getting your alerts from, and then having that feed into a SIEM. With regards to specific SIEMs, there's actually many vendors out there which have things like NERC and NERC compliance rules, for example, as well. So there's a load of different vendors out there that have these capabilities, and really the best answer is to kind of start researching that what's out there for you. But again, what's most important is the location of that scene. But absolutely correct. Lower levels of the Purdue, you want to forward those logs up, possibly again to an ICS DMZ. I'd start there. Great question. All right. Okay, so with that, we're coming to the end of this episode, and what we have talked about is ITOT convergence, really focusing on the technology that we've converged on for the last 20 years. Beyond that, we talked a little bit about the convergence of skill sets and teams, having a dedicated SOC for ICS and dedicated SOC for IT. But the critical part we're looking at is the people and the technology converged into a triaged area where all security events across the entire organization is coming into. The great thing about that, looking at all the data throughout IT and ICS, is now with that approach, we can track adversary movement right from IT right in through to the ICS. From an industrial control system cyber defense perspective, with that approach, we now have visibility so we can get early detections of a threat coming in through the front door in IT, which is commonly that we see on a regular basis. All right, so again, thanks again for your comments today. Super appreciate you guys connecting with us and on this ICS Defense Force. See you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.